Well, hello everyone. I got another guest on the channel today. I'm sure most of you have seen Bart from Bart's Book Space. I've been watching Bart's channel even before I started my channel. I think he started just a little bit before me. And this is the first time we've got to, be in person, so to speak, and have a discussion. So I'm really glad to have you on, Bart.
Yeah, this is exciting. Thank you so much for having me on your channel. It has been, like we said before we started, a long time coming, but it's gonna be fun. I think we have a good book to talk about. It's a book that is historically important, which is always nice. Not just another book, but something that has some bearing on the science fiction genre. So yeah, it's a good one. And yeah, let's get into it. Thank you so much for the invite to the buddy read and for hosting this.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to do this. So yeah, we read The Mote in God's Eye by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. And this was written in 1974, got nominated for a few awards, but it lost out to Ursula K. Le Guin's Dispossessed. So I mean, they were up against some stiff competition there. And like you said, this is it's a definitely an interesting book. It's a very long book for the 70s, but I feel like it was definitely inspirational. I don't think you would have had stories like from Werner Vinge, things like that. It seemed like they were really inspired by, yeah.
I think Deepness in the Sky is somewhat similar to this one. Fire Up on the Deep, one of my favorite books by Werner, also a little bit in a different vein, but definitely owns an homage to this book. I think this was one of the first like space operas. It's pretty big. It's a big book, yeah. 560 pages in my copy. I think most of the books at the time, 60s, this is 1974, the year I was born. Interesting. They were much shorter at that time. So this one definitely has that going for it.
Yeah, there was a couple, big books that had come out. I was kind of thinking about that. Dune came out. That's a long book that came out before this. There's a few, but they were anomalies for their time. And it is really a big space opera because it covers so many different ideas and topics in science fiction. But what I knew going into this one was it handled first contact really well. And I had heard that Niven and Pournelle really made these aliens feel alien. And after finishing it, I have to agree with that synopsis.
I do as well, if I can jump in. I think that's probably the best. Well, there are a few things that I liked, and then there were a few things in this story that did not work well for me. But the aliens at the end of the book, I definitely feel were the highlight of the story. Very nuanced as far as not just the way they looked, because at first I thought it was a little bit gimmicky. Some of the covers actually showed the aliens. My cover does not. Neither does yours, really. It's a close-up. It's not an alien.
Yeah, mine just shows an eye.
I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the aliens are asymmetrical, which is unusual in itself. But I thought it was, at first, I thought it was a little bit gimmicky. Two hands on one side, one strong hand on the other. I thought it was a little bit gimmicky. By the time I finished the book, I have to say the aliens were excellent. I may say, unfortunately, I like the aliens a lot more than I like the humans. The human characters to me were very, whatever. There was quite a few of them. But I did not latch on to anyone. I did not care about anyone. But the aliens were pretty awesome.
And I think we both agree with that. When you have a big book like this, getting close to 600 pages, you expect that maybe you're going to get some real deep character studies and really feel for these characters. And you didn't quite get that in this one. So you have the length to deal with here without some of the things that can kind of suck you into a book. But still, it was the ideas and these aliens. There was more alien world building than character development, I think. So
I agree. I think when at the time, most of the books, and you've read so many of those books, even since you've started the channel, you've been going through all these books in the Masterpiece of Science Fiction collection. A lot of them are 250 pages. That's probably the average, maybe 300. So half of what this is. And I think when a book is heavy on ideas and there's lack of character development, that's fine. But when it's closer to 600 pages, you hope to care about these humans. I didn't really care about any of them. There's a romance in this book that I thought was poorly handled. I thought it was just unnecessary, even because it just wasn't good. But again, the aliens, the nuance, and the mystery. The book is a slow burn of reveals, and you're trying to figure out, or at least I was, are these aliens good? Are they bad? What is their motivation? What are they trying to achieve? What is the game that they're playing? And it was fascinating to slowly figure out their culture, how they develop different castes within their world, different types. There are different types of aliens also that we meet. It isn't just one alien. So yeah, really well done when it comes to the aliens. I think if anyone listening, watching this likes to read about aliens, and really, who doesn't? Who doesn't like aliens? Come on. If you like science fiction, everyone has to love aliens. I think it's a book that you should read. They're good. They're good. Dawn I read not too long ago, and also the aliens were fascinating because of how odd, how different they were from humans. Not so much, although also in the appearance, but in the way they thought. And I think similarly in this book, we get that.
Yeah. It's harder than you think to write truly alien entities, and when someone does it, you might not appreciate how hard that is, but I think they did a good job, for especially in the 70s. So I think what I'm gonna do is just give a quick synopsis so people kind of understand the setup of this book a little bit, because there's a lot of other interesting things going on, and I'll kind of take it up to the point where we get to the first contact. You can jump in and add anything I miss, but we're about 1,000 years in the future. And what's interesting is when you first open up this book, you get a list of characters. So you know it's going to be packed with characters. There's like a couple pages here. And then you get a kind of chronological timeline starting in 1969 when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And then it goes up to about 1,000 years later where it just says first contact. So even before you start the book, you know you're going to have a bunch of characters, this massive timeline that's kind of like built into the sub part of the plot. And we're kind of on this like planet, and there was this rebellion kind of going on. And our main character, Rod Blaine, he ends up kind of inheriting the command of one of these big starships. And at the kind of, after this conflict kind of ends on this planet, he ends up taking a couple passengers on. One guy is named Burry. He's kind of a shady character. We don't know exactly what he's all about, but he's like a merchant. He's a trader, and he's been assigned to this guy's command. And then we get this lady, basically the only female human in the book. And she's working on her doctorate in, I think it was anthropology.
Anthropology, yeah.
Yeah.
Which comes in handy, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So they take her on, and you've got this, the way it's written, and we discussed this a little bit in the beginning, it uses a lot of terminology from like the Navy and all of that. So we have midshipmen, and the way they describe the ship and the roles on the ship are very kind of antiquated. But they were postulating that this is just like how people were going to run starships, just like ships back in the day, I guess. So we get this crew captained by Rod Blaine, and they're going to go back to this, I think, what was it called? The Trans-Coalsack sector. And on the way out there, they get word that there's a spaceship entering the area, and they need to go investigate it. And the only other thing I'll say here first is humans have two really cool things that they've developed. They have the Anderson drive, which basically allows them to kind of warp speed travel between certain points in the galaxy. And then they have this Langston field, which is kind of like a force field that can protect them from certain things. And so these are like major developments that have helped humanity spread out all throughout the galaxy. And up until this point, they've never come across any real intelligent alien life. They've found life on other planets. I think, plants and maybe some very low level animals maybe, but nothing intelligent until they investigate this light sail ship that's floating into the area. So
That's right.
anything I missed?
No, that's a great, and that's just the beginning of the story. Really, they come across this ship coming in, an alien ship that they realize it's an alien ship by where it's coming from. I think projection in space. They realize that it wasn't using any FTL, faster than light technology. That it was actually traveling through the millennia that it takes to travel at more normal speeds. So it's a mystery, and I don't know if we want to get into what happens with that ship specifically, but suffice to say, whatever they find, it is an alien first meeting with an alien. There is a precarious situation that's happening that they have to navigate, and after that, they have a decision to make, kind of on a global scale. What do we do now that we know that these aliens, we know where they came from, where they live? Do we wait for them to come, or do we go visit? Of course, they go visit, they go to investigate, and that's really where this story starts to take off once they kind of get to the planet, and once we actually have proper meeting, because that first introduction to the alien is not, let's say, not a complete meeting with aliens. But
that's a good way to put it without spoiling it.
Yeah. There's a reason for that, and you're gonna have to read the book if you're interested in. If you haven't read it, if you've read it, then you know what happens with that original spaceship. But then humans do venture into the space of Motes, and yeah, that's where the story begins. And the story is really, I think, nuanced. It's intricate. It really has a lot of moving pieces. What I like about it is the fact that it's got that romance that we mentioned that is not great in my opinion, but it's got the space opera element. It's got military science, a lot of diplomacy, which I thought was well handled, interesting, and nuanced. It didn't, especially from the side of the Motes. The humans felt to me like most of the humans were either, we want to be friends with these Motes. They're great. What are you talking about? They're so friendly. They're so nice to us. And then there's another set of humans that are like, no contact. They can't come onto our ship. We should just blast them, So that was interesting that there was a little bit of lack of within the human side. And like I already said, I preferred the Motes to humans, maybe also because of that. They were just written better. We don't get as much point of view of the Motes, but we do get, it's in italics typically, I think, in my book anyway. And when you hear the Motes, I was always, oh my God, now I'm like getting these, little tidbits of information about how they think. And that was awesome. And they were very, very interesting to kind of decipher.
Yeah. And going back to what you said, when I was reading, so these humans, like you said, there's kind of two camps of humans.
Yeah.
And so Rod, our main character, he kind of takes his ship, and he's basically got a bunch of scientists who are just gung-ho to go make first contact and study this planet, these aliens and everything. And then you have this other commander of another ship who's xenophobic, basically.
Yeah.
Like you said, they want to blast them out because they're scared. The one thing they're scared about is losing some of their technology, or the technology getting stolen from them. This Anderson drive and the Langston field. This is very proprietary to humans as far as they know, and it's kind of our safe thing that we have to protect ourselves against them. And at first, when I was reading it, I mean, you're meant to kind of side with the scientists, but when I reflect on this book, I really like that part where you had these two groups, and it was, this mission was set up to where two ships were gonna FTL over to this Mote world, and if any inkling that these aliens were gonna get any of our technology, the military ship was just gonna blow the scientific ship, just blow it up, as That's opposed right. to maybe losing this technology to the aliens. That was like part of the deal. And on reflection, I thought that was really good, because when you get to the end of this, neither one of them were right. It wasn't really even between these two decisions. It was somewhere else up here, the outcome. And I think that on reflection was done really well.
I agree, and I think that the strength also of this book is in the fact that it does not give at the end of the book, and I know that there's a follow-up to it also, which I do not have, but this book doesn't give a decisive. I mean, it definitely has a good answer. It has a good ending, satisfactory, but it doesn't give the big ending, the big picture kind of. It leaves things up to imagination, what may or may not happen in the future. But it also postulates and makes you think: is it even possible to ever trust another alien? Because based on what you read in this book, it's questionable whether it's really possible. So we have this, this feeling of, oh yes, aliens would be nice. They'll come, maybe, some of the books talk about aliens kind of cuddling us and helping us, and especially books that were written during the Soviet Union, the Cold War, with the scare of, nuclear annihilation on everybody's minds almost daily. I think there were a lot of books that were written where the aliens hoped to kind of save us from ourselves, and then there's all these books where aliens come and they're just like all bad and they're just here to wipe us out. It's one or the other. This book is really nuanced in the sense that we look at these aliens kind of as us, just different, and they also want to figure out, can they trust us and can they trade with us? What are the benefits? What are the risks? And of course, from their perspective, some of the risks are unacceptable, and from ours also. Therefore, that second ship actually does make sense. So you're right. I also, by the time I finished the book, I really appreciated that, even though I wanted some of the humans to be kind of like in between, to have that just common sense about what's going on, as opposed to just being kind of already predetermined that, okay, I'm going to be, no matter what happens, pretty much, I'm for the aliens. I want us to connect with them, or I want to just, wipe them out. But yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting.
And the aliens, they, as far as the humans know, they didn't have a couple of these major advances the humans had. It gets a little, the plot progresses a little bit there. I won't go into details about that, but these are very advanced aliens. But what they're really good at is like building things. And I think you mentioned it earlier. There's kind of different casts of these aliens. They have little ones that can go around and kind of self-replicate and go ahead of the other ones and build up a bunch of things. And there's engineers and diplomats, and like you're kind of set into this.
So I think there's masters. They're also differentiated by the color of their fur. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure always about that idea, but anyway, so the whites are the masters. Then there are browns, who are the engineers. Then we also have these mediators, which are like a mix of them. The engineers I thought were very interesting because they can't help, but they have to improve things all the time. So like they get on the ship and like they see a coffee maker, they improve it so now the coffee's like amazing. The author doesn't really go into detail what's changed about this coffee maker, but now it's like the most amazing thing ever. They'll make the gun like just fit in such a way that it's all of a sudden even better than it was before. So it was kind of funny. It was also interesting that that those same engineers, they're really not communicative in any way. And for humans, they don't know. It's the first meeting with these aliens. So figuring out these differences between the aliens themselves also was a challenge. And I thought it was handled very well in the book, the way it was presented.
Yeah, I think one of the authors must have loved coffee, because they talked about coffee a lot. And I'm a coffee lover. I'm kind of considering myself a connoisseur. And they were talking about how the proper way to brew it. And like they went into and I read some reviews later that were like, why were they talking about coffee so much in this book?
Well, also the funny thing is not funny, actually. There's nothing funny about it. But there are two authors to this book. So I was as I was reading it, it wasn't apparent to me because I haven't read either one. I think I read something by Niven and Asimov did they write something together? Or maybe no, maybe I'm making that up. But anyway, I don't think I've read anything. So, but this book was really cohesive. It did not feel like a book that was written by two people where you could kind of pick out, oh, well, the prose is lacking now, or it was better before. It flowed very, very well. But yeah, it was interesting that two guys came together to kind of write this story, and I wonder if maybe love of coffee of one of them was what snuck in there.
Yeah, I think so. I've read another co-authored book by them, but I think this was the first book they co-authored, and Niven ended up writing with all kinds of people, Steve Barnes and tons with Larry Niven and a bunch of others. But if you look at Jerry Pournelle. If you look at what Jerry Pournelle wrote on his own, it seems to be more military science fiction. So I haven't read a Pournelle only book, but I just assumed that he kind of brought the military aspect into this one. And I'm glad, because military science fiction is not really my favorite if that's what it's really leaning into. But I think with this one, there was just enough to make it kind of believable and plausible, because if we did make first contact, they're going to send the military out alongside of whoever else gets to go. So I thought it brought a very realistic element to the novel.
So that's interesting. So perhaps that's kind of, where Pournelle was bringing the military sci-fi, and maybe Niven was writing some of the other parts. I wonder, I'd love to find out. If somebody knows, leave a comment. Let us know. We'll read them. I would be curious to know if they split the roles that way. You're going to handle those parts. I'll handle the diplomacy, or maybe more of the dialogue, world building. I wonder, because there was also interesting world building, I thought, on the alien side, because we do find out a little bit, no spoilers, but we do find out quite a bit of the history and how the aliens function, and what makes them, what is the problem. There's we're not going to spoil this at all, but there's a problem in their way of perceiving the world, and just living as and I thought it was really interesting. There is also 1,000 years of history that is presented on the human side, and that I didn't think was actually was interesting when I was reading on the first page. And it's got the names, and then it's got the 1,000 years of history. I thought that was interesting. But then once we started reading, what I didn't like, it felt to me like this was written in 1974. But a lot of times, the conservatism and it seemed like it was like taking place in 1950s. Like it wasn't even the 70s. It wasn't even the free, 60s. Everybody loves, smoking weed. None of that. It was very conservative. Like, pearl clutching, and like, like if the girl is talking about, not even sex, but anything to do with reproduction, she was like, all red. So it felt like the 50s, and also a lot of things did. But then there was also some hard sci-fi elements that were handled well. So it's just like this mixed bag of things that you can, pick out and kind of, complain about, because there's some things to complain about also about the language itself, which is not unusual for a book written at that time. But there were a few things like that. There was use of word rape that was very odd to me. I don't know if you picked it up. There's a few times when it's used kind of as a curse, I think. But I didn't get it. So there's just some things that really like pull you out of the story and just rub me the wrong way. And you mentioned the only female in this story. It's but it's 1974. It wasn't shocking at the time, but I think for some readers, maybe some younger readers, I'm 50. Some younger readers may not appreciate that. So we should just mention it. I suppose that there are some things that you may struggle with, but I think it's worth reading for all the positive things that we've already brought up, even if there's a little bit of sexism there. There was a statement that human women, when they're pregnant, are useless. For example, like things like just unnecessary in the book at all, I thought.
So definitely things people wouldn't write now, even to be edgy. It's just definitely product of its time, and maybe even a little before its time.
And listen, I don't like political correctness. I think I think it's interesting to read a book from the 70s, and I want that in the book. I want the author's mind. I want I want it to feel like it was written then. I enjoy reading older books because of that. And I almost wish some newer, younger authors would take more chances, I suppose, as opposed to just trying to be and inserting certain characters just for the sake of checking off a box. I'm not for that. But in this book, there were a few things that I didn't like. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned like the characters aren't completely realistic, or you don't really feel for them too much. But there was some midshipmen. There was just so many things that happen in this book. There's a lot of action and scenes, but there's these 3 midshipmen. I think it's Whitbread and Potter, and I forget the last one. And they kind of end up getting ordered around to go do all these things. So they're kind of in the midst of the action, and they've kind of got this kind of dry, sarcastic sense of humor. They were my favorite characters just because of the little bit of humor that was thrown in with these guys. But besides them, characters weren't that fantastic in my opinion. But you did get a little bit of alien characters. Like you said, you get to see them from the humans' point of view, and then you get parts of chapters written from their point of view. And that was they almost spent more time building that up and making that feel real than the actual humans feeling real.
Yeah, I completely agree. The humans were stiff, wooden. They were not written. There was nothing interesting about them. There's no development. But a couple of them I thought were better than others. I like the midshipmen. They get thrown into a certain situation. And it's good. Some info dumping there also, as we learned, but I guess that was the only way to handle kind of the history of the Motes. But I did like. So first of all, I thought it was curious how this world was built, just where it seemed to be just Americans and just Russians. So that was a little curious. But the commander of the second ship, the military ship, is Russian, and I thought he was interesting. I thought he was well developed. Like I understood him completely the way he behaved, and even though he was very hard, I didn't think he was bad. He wasn't a villain. He was. There was nuance to him. I also liked the trader. I forget his name right now. Burry. Was it? Burry. Yeah, you mentioned he was one of the passengers that were picked up. There was a backstory to his why he's on the ship, but I also thought he was, especially towards the end of the story, I thought it was very interesting. So I thought he was. They stood out to me as unique. They had a voice. They thought differently, whereas most of the other people were, kind of wooden, and the language was not. I mean, overall, I think the prose in this book is okay. It's very readable. It's good for what it is. It reads well. It's not a super fast read. At least it wasn't for me. But it's well written. But there are very few like flourishes where like, oh my God, this analogy is like mind blowing, or this description of the planet is like, what? No, it was kind of just okay when it comes to prose.
Yeah, I don't think Niven or Pournelle were known to be like prose stylists at all.
Perhaps that. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say that perhaps that's why Ursula K. Le Guin took the Hugo, or the Hugo with the Dispossessed, because that's quite a different story when it comes to Le Guin. Her prose is beautiful. Her descriptions are fascinating and fantastic.
Yeah. And see, having these conversations with someone about this while you were talking about the characters, I think they were good at giving the characters motivations, because even Burry, he had his motivations.
Yeah.
The captain of the more military ship had motivations, all the scientists. So the motivations were there. You could understand. It felt realistic. You just didn't really care if something happened to some of these people. Sometimes they didn't feel complete, like genuine person. They didn't have the personality, but they had the motives, really, So.
Yeah, I agree. But overall, I thought it was it's one of those books that I think that grows on you when you finish reading it and you start to kind of think about it, sit back, what it actually did, how many things it was juggling at the same time. and pretty much nothing fell to the floor. By the end of the book, it was all still there and well wrapped up. So I like that. I have a question for you. Do you have any? I don't even remember the title of the follow-up to this. Do you have any interest in reading the follow-up?
Yeah, I have it right here.
There you go. The gripping hand. That's right.
Yeah, I think so. I think, they wrote it almost 20 years later. I don't know if I'm in a hurry to read it, but I have a copy of it. I think I do want to read it. I read Ringworld by Larry Niven, and I think I could definitely see where Niven comes up with these really good ideas, and that seems to be a polarizing book. I really enjoyed it. But a long time ago, I read Lucifer's Hammer, and this was written by both of them. And this was a very realistic account of if a comet hit the planet Earth and what it would do. It was very realistic, very fascinating, a bit dry. It was one of my favorite post-apocalyptic books when I read it at the time. So I really like what they do, but they definitely have a certain flavor that I couldn't binge at all. I think I need to space them out a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm not too interested in what's gonna happen next. Like, I'm totally fine with the ending the way it is. But I'm pretty sure I'm gonna pick up the follow-up also at some point and read it because I do like this book quite a bit. The more I think about it, the more I like it. It probably started off when I finished it with like a 3-star read. Now it's inching up to definitely 3.5. I would give maybe even 4 because of its historical importance. And we always have to think about a book when it was written, when these ideas were fresh, as opposed to if someone is kind of regurgitating the same stuff that's been written. It's never the same. So I think the historical importance and the fact that it was written 50 years ago, definitely a big plus as well.
I think I'm the same way. I was maybe thinking 3.5 or something at first, but the more I think about it, it's kind of leaning towards a 4. We'll have to see. But also, just for the listeners here, even though it's a long book and everything, there's a lot going on. There's this intense mystery of what's going on with this alien civilization. And I would say about 3/4 of the way through, maybe a little further, that kind of gets revealed. And it's kind of mind-blowing in a way. There's no way I think I could have predicted it or saw it coming, what's really going on here. And then the rest of the book, there's kind of another mystery, like, okay, now that's resolved, now what do we do with this situation? And so then you have the final build up to a decision that's kind of has to be made. And they handle that amazing. The idea of some of these plot twists, or whatever you'd want to call them, these mysteries, I thought were some of like my favorite parts of this book. And it, even though it's long, I think it will keep you reading through to try to figure out what's really going on.
I think that's what kept me interested, the way things were hinted at, sprinkled, but not revealed, and the slow reveal of understanding of the motivation and how they operate and how the world works, and just their outlook on nihilistic or optimistic. There's like a lot of things that slowly get revealed, and the mystery was fascinating and very well handled. I thought the reveals were well done, and it helped with the pacing also. And I think it's got good pace overall because you get action sprinkled in at times. It's not like and then big action at the end. It's all well laid out. So there's a lot to like about this book. Some things that bother me that may not bother others. The way they spoke, I felt it at times it almost read like this was a YA book. Like, purposefully, it wasn't trying to be adult enough in these difficult situations to. And I'm not saying you have to use curses in a book to show that it's for adults, but it felt restrained in some way with its language, kind of too nice almost. Or maybe I've read some books recently that are just very raw, and that was, but yeah, there's just this interesting dichotomy to this book. Just so many things where you can just concentrate. I could see readers getting hung up on certain things, as I almost was maybe at a time as I was reading it, maybe halfway through, maybe a little less than halfway, and just kind of convincing yourself that this isn't a good book because of this, and you're missing all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You're missing the forest for the trees, whatever the analogy is with that. But in the end, this was a well-deserving book to be called by some a masterpiece of science fiction.
Yeah, out of all these books I've read, I wouldn't agree that all of them are masterpieces by any means. I think part of that's marketing, but this one I do feel like, especially imagine reading this in 1974 is probably really mind-blowing and everything. Yeah, so yeah. That's
a good point too. Like thinking about even in my own lifetime, I've recently started rereading some of the books that I read years ago. I need to reread Lem because it's been many years since I've read them. For example, I want to reread the first science fiction book that I read in English was Rendezvous with Rama, Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama. And I loved it. It blew my mind. I wonder if I would love it as much if I read it now. It must have been 1991 when I read it, or 92, something like that, right? Early 90s, maybe 1990 even. I don't know. But that's when I read Rendezvous with Rama, early 90s. And it changed my life. I really loved it. I mean, it was amazing. I was imagining, this dumb big object coming into space and these astronauts going out to inspect it. And I mean, I was read with excitement reading it. But I wonder if I would feel the same way now. It's a different experience, I suppose.
Yeah, rereading is always interesting. It can maybe ruin some of those fond memories at times. But so far, I haven't had anything that I regretted rereading, because I have been rereading quite a few books lately. And I was never a rereader, really. I was like, why would I waste my time rereading? There's so many other books that are on my TBR, But there is a lot of enjoyment out of rereading. I'm going to be reading Rendezvous with Rama soon too. So,
yeah, we're supposed to get a movie, Rendezvous with Rama. So I definitely want to. I think Villeneuve is making it after Dune 2. That was the next thing, his next project. I don't know if it's in the works, but I did hear that it's coming. So that would be an interesting one. Although after I read Rendezvous with Rama, I did read the sequels. And I struggled through those. They were not great.
I've heard the same thing. I've only read the first book, so
unfortunately, I pushed on, and it did not work out very well. But yeah, I'm gonna reread it as well and see if I enjoy it as much. I hope I do. Yeah, I mean, I just read recently a book, Quantum Thief by Hanu Rajanemi. It's awesome. It's mind-boggling. It's a difficult read because you're like dumped into the middle. Now we're a bit of subject. Hope you don't mind. But it was fascinating. It was interesting. It was so fresh, I thought. And I'm thinking like, I want to read it again because there were so many things that, that I would on a reread, especially a recent one, I would be able to appreciate. As you're reading it, you're kind of lost, but I was understanding the broad strokes, what's going on, but the nuances were lost at me because the author really doesn't hold your hand at all, at all. There's different terminology and it's really interesting. So that's one book that I read just recently, and I'm thinking, I want to reread it before I read book 2, even now. So yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, you can. I've done that a couple times recently, and you can see how well the author crafted things with little hints or foreshadowing, or just the way they tell a story after reading it and then going through in a second time right away. It can be really interesting. And if you're interested in writing, the process of writing, sometimes you do that and I realize that I could never do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have interest in writing?
Yeah, I've always tried. I've got ideas bouncing around in my head, but whenever I try to put the pen to paper, it's just doesn't come out the way I imagine it. So, and I think like the best advice is you just have to write and write and write and write, and don't start with a novel. I think you got to start writing short stories first. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And even like the last thing about the rereads, rewatching stuff also could be when something is really good and intricate and hints are left. I rewatched Severance. I don't know if you've watched Severance. Such a good show. I recommend it. And season 1, I rewatched it twice. So I watched it 3 times in effect. And it was fascinating. The watching it again, like, oh, now I get it. Like those moments are awesome. So, yeah. Watch Severance. It's good. It's science fiction and so smart, so well acted.
I've had a lot of people recommend that recently. So it's probably the next. Me and the wife watch a little bit of TV, and we're finishing up one, so that'll probably be the next one. See if she's into it, which she usually is.
You have to watch maybe three episodes at least to kind of see if it's for you, because if it's a bit of a slow reveal, slow burn in the beginning, but it's so worth it. It's amazing.
Okay. Well, any last thoughts on The Mote in God's Eye?
The last thoughts, I don't know. I think it's a good book. I think for me, it's not gonna be one of my all-time favorite reads, but I can understand why some people call it a masterpiece. And I think anyone who likes science fiction, I would recommend to pick up A Mote in God's Eye and give it a read and see what you think. It was a good one. I really enjoyed it so much. Even just this cover with the mote, the red giant, and then the smaller star. Just a lot of imagination went into this. Even if not everything was executed the way I would like it to be, it's a thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I would say I'm really glad I read it. There was some times where I was questioning how great it was, but on reflection, I think they did a really good job. I think if you're reading through the classics, you will bump across this one at some point. If you see the history and the characters and feel like, oh, I'm going to be overwhelmed, don't. It reads pretty easy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I recently was waylaid by Startide Rising by David Brin. I just went into that thinking that was going to be a casual book, and it is not. It is way more hard to follow and complex, and I almost just reread it because I was just like, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I thought this was going to be kind of along those lines, but it's very easy to digest and read. There might be some spots that slow you down a little bit, but definitely worth a read.
I felt the same way reading Diaspora. I was just like, oh my God, I know this is good. This is deep. This is interesting, but I have no idea what is going on. I was like, I got no clue. I am so lost. This is beyond my, my capability of my mind to comprehend. Egan's Diaspora was a tough one for me. Have you read it?
Well, I have not read that one. I've heard it's really challenging. Yeah. And I really do recommend Startide Rising. It's amazing. But what's so hard about it is you have a bunch of characters that are dolphins, and it's hard to differentiate them. And so there's people who've made kind of like artistic renditions of each dolphin character so that you can visualize them. And next time I'm going to have that like printed out next to me so I can imagine, because I was losing the plot. I didn't know which dolphin was which, kind of.
Yeah. I with Diaspora, I was at times lost. I didn't even know where we were. Are we in the real world? Are we in the simulation? Are we somewhere in it was dense and difficult to follow. You have to really read slowly, take notes. It's one of those books that's good at a certain time when you have the time to kind of devote to it and really study it. Because as I was reading, I felt that this is a good book. I'm just not getting it. Sometimes you read a book and you're like, oh, this is garbage. This is shit. This is like you're not enjoying it because you feel like it's not a good book. I knew it's good, but it was just eluding me. It was like I was trying to grasp it, and it was just always outside my reach, basically.
I like those kind of books. Here's a trick: read that with Chris from Liminal Spaces, and then do a video, and he'll help explain some of it to you.
We did that recently.
I had to read
we did
with him a book like that was kind of going over my head, and he broke it all down. He's a deep reader.
Yeah. We had a good time. We read the Canticle for Leibowitz together.
Yeah.
And then we had a good discussion. This was on Robin's channel, Robin from Bookspin. We had a good time talking about it, and yeah, he definitely had some insight. That was a good book too, by the way.
Yeah.
We had a good time reading the book. Was fascinating. I think at this point, one of my favorite top 5 dystopian post-apocalyptic novels. Very philosophical and interesting and very well written. Really good prose. Better prose than here.
Yeah. Well, we definitely got to do this more. I mean, we could probably talk for hours about this.
Yeah.
We should kind of plan some book in the future, or do another read along, grab someone else, or whatever. I'm up for whatever. I get a little busy in the summer, but during the fall and the winter and spring, I've really been enjoying doing these reads and discussions with people. Same.
And also, I would say I have 2 episodes so far of this Why Sci-Fi. Oh my gosh, what happened there? Did you see the balloons?
Yeah, that's fancy.
Okay, I didn't know that was going to happen, but there are balloons.
You did some sort of gesture or something.
We're celebrating. Yeah, I don't know. Is it peace? Does this bring balloons? I don't know. Why Sci-Fi? So I'd love to invite you to be part of that. Maybe the next episode. I have one episode that I was supposed to already shoot with Jonathan from Words in Time, but he had some technical difficulties, let's say. But I would love to have you maybe on the next one, and we just have fun talking about science fiction, kind of like this, not around a certain book, but just I'll have some questions. And the 2 episodes that I had were a lot of fun. So that would be.
I watched those. Yeah, those were great.
Awesome. So we'll figure out a time to do that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and thanks Bart for doing this buddy read. Really had a lot of fun talking about you.
Thank you.
So,
always there's no way to get this right on the first try. I've tried it, I think, on every video, and I'm always like, oh, now I got it right, but it's like not on the first try.